So after the last drive I went in my Cavalier where I had a terrible or non-functioning phone mount, I've discovered that Cavalier headrests make fantastic mounts. The seat might wobble a bit, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was before. So I recently got this turbo diesel. A week ago I went down to Newcastle and picked it up, and the green one that I have done videos on recently, I sold that. Thankfully it went to an enthusiast. The guy really appreciated it, so that was a good outcome for that. Brought that one back to life and now it's sold. And now we've got this 1.7 Isuzu turbo diesel one. So everybody that has ever been in a taxi in the 1990s will probably be familiar with this car. Differences between this one and the last one in terms of aesthetics, well, it's got electric mirrors. It's a GLS trim over the LS trim that I had the last time. Electric mirrors don't work. It's got an analog clock. The later LS that I had, which was December 93, this is February 93, it had a nice digital clock with outside temperature display, but this one's just got this analog clock. That's pretty much, this has got the GLS blue interior, which isn't as nice as the SRI interior, and the other one I had, you got a plain gear lever, which you can't see in the camera there. You do get a nicer steering wheel though, non-airbag, really nice sports kind of 3-spoke steering wheel, really nice. It's in good condition as well, only 94,000 miles, so you know it's only got 94,000 miles worth of wear as opposed to 206,000 miles, my last one. What else do you get? Don't know. Cassette holder. It's a button that I don't know what it does down in the centre console. I think that is to disable the electric windows. Anyway, this is an indirect injection, so this is not an engine that I know a lot about. Don't know a lot about old indirect diesel engines, so I've got the Haynes manual for it, for the diesel engine, GM diesel engine. This is the Isuzu diesel engine. You can probably hear that and see it in the camera. At idle it is quite rough, but as soon as you raise the revs, it's lovely. Vauxhall also did a 1.7D, and when you look at it and somebody says, oh, my Cavalier's a diesel, and they open up the bonnet and you'll be thinking, oh, no it's not, that's a petrol, mate. But it's based on the petrol block. Can't imagine how slow that must be, because this turbo diesel isn't all that quick. One thing I've noticed about this car and my last Cavalier is how popular it is with onlookers. Everybody over a certain age looks at you, everybody, and it's like they're looking at the car thinking, oh my god, I've not seen a Cavi in years on the road. So as I say, this one's done 94,000. It's still, I'd still say it was in its first flush of youth, I would say. Squeaky clutch pedal. Now funnily enough, my last Cavalier didn't have that, despite having 206,000. But a lot of other ones I've seen videos of on YouTube. I've not actually been in another Cavalier for a long time, so I couldn't remember, but other videos I've seen on YouTube of Cavaliers, they've got the squeaky clutch pedal as well. So this one has that. The only reason I hear it is because I've not got the radio on, because I'm talking on the camera. So yeah, as I was saying, the engine's still in its first flush of youth. 94,000 it's got on it. So that is quite a surprisingly low mileage for one of these. Drives without too many issues. I thought the gear change was a bit sticky, and a few other people that have driven this actual car said the same thing, but I've discovered that the pedal, I don't know whether it was just a wee bit stiff or whatever, but it had a little bit of extra travel. You had to push a bit harder, push it down onto the floorboards, and then the gear change is absolutely fine, so that's fixed. It's audible on the motorway, but it's not. I mean, I've also got, at the other end of the spectrum, I've also got a Rover 75 diesel, a 2004, and that's probably one of the last kind of sort of big diesels. Oh, by the way, temperature gauge is of the barometer type. You need to tap it, there you go, to get it to show the right temperature. I forecast 89 brake horsepower. I lost my train of thought there. I can't remember what I was saying now. Yeah, anyway, it's not that. Yeah, it's not that audible. As I say, my Rover 75 diesel is kind of the last of the lines of big 2-litre turbo diesels before they started making them all. You know, these 1-litre triple turbo self-imploding after 3,000 miles type diesels. So I would consider it to be at the sort of pinnacle of diesel engine technology, and this one is probably more towards the kind of start. But when you're on the road, we're doing 65 miles an hour now, and it's got a slightly industrial note. When it's a 75, it's got more of a kind of slightly boomy, maybe a bit smoother, but still just as audible. So really, and I think if you're asking me what engine note I prefer, I much prefer this one. This has got a more purposeful kind of sound to it, and it's a sound that you just don't hear anymore. One thing also about it is it is incredibly clean. It doesn't smoke at all. I did a cold start on it, put the camera behind it, and it was like it wasn't even running. So I was quite impressed with that. There's no smoke while you're driving either. So yeah, when you're on the motorway, after about 2,500 revs, it does wake up quite a bit, and it is actually, it's quite sprightly really. It's not got a lot of torque at low revs, so if you're in a 50 miles an hour zone and you're in top gear and you hit a hill, you're going to have to change down to 4th gear. But it's quite civilised. When it's idling in the driveway, it's you can hear it, but I don't tend to sit idling it, so that doesn't really matter. So one thing I like about Cavaliers is I've got no experience of Cavaliers. When I'm nearly 42 this year. When I was a kid, I always thought I'd have a Fiesta Mark II, and then an Escort Mark 3 or 4, and then a Sierra. I was always wanted a Ford, but I always ended up with Vauxhalls, but with Corsas and things. But I never took any notice of Cavaliers. But now that I got that green one, I got that cheap, an opportunity to own a Cavalier, and I actually really like them. They're very wafty if they're in good fettle, which both this one and the green one were. They waft along. They don't make cars like that anymore. Cars now, you never see a car now, you go over a bump and it bounces more than once. When I say bounce, it just kind of floats. It takes more than one oscillation to go back to its normal ride height. And cars nowadays are all quite firm, which is good in its own way. But this is quite old school. It actually reminds me, driving wise, suspension wise, it reminds me of my Mark I Renault Megane, which had torsion bar rear suspension, which was another absolutely tremendous car. I would recommend you try one of those before they're all used up, they're all worn out and gone. There's a few can still come up for sale. So yeah, it wafts along. When I drove it back up the A68 from Newcastle, it really bowled along. You know, it kept up with more than kept up with the traffic. You know, it's quite long-legged. I wasn't tired after the journey. I drove for 3 hours. I wasn't particularly tired. I didn't have nothing ached. You know, I very comfortable. Ventilation system on the car is good. You can't really, the driving position is good. You really can't fault it. And this has got new Toyo Proxys tyres all round. I think I mentioned that in my last video. So although it rolls a bit, it did actually grip really well. So that's my experience of Cavaliers. All round visibility is amazing. The windows in the Cavaliers are huge. Really, it's at a low belt line. Really huge windows. You notice it if you stand back from a Cavalier and you look at it, particularly the hatchback ones. Huge boot. Swallow anything, that boot. Perfectly comfortable for 5 people. Although I'll never have 5 people in it, there's only 3 of us. The only thing that probably lets this car down is it's okay, it's a 10 footer. Up close, if I'm honest, the paint looks like shit. The lacquer has fallen off in a fair number of places, whereas the green one was pretty much mint, bar a little bit of lacquer peel at the top of the door there. It was pretty much mint. I am still questioning the decision of selling the green one and keeping this one. But I think this is the nicer car to drive. I just feel with this car you can jump in it and just drive it. It starts up, it doesn't even crank when it starts up, it just bursts straight into life like Japanese diesels do. So this is the 1.7 Isuzu turbo diesel. I think it's got 89 brake, so it's on par with the 1.8 petrol, 8 valve, which is also 89 brake. Turbocharged and intercooled. It seems to be quite well, it's still quite well regarded. I think in its day it was overshadowed, but it probably still is, overshadowed by the XUD Peugeot Citroen diesel, and probably also the Ford 1.8 diesel as well. But these can rack up huge mileages, so I'm told. So it can't be that bad. The guy I bought this from said that he was looking for a Cavalier diesel specifically, which is quite a tall order. And he was looking for a Cavalier diesel, and all the ones that he saw were, you know, 400,000 miles, 300,000 miles, really crazy miles. They'd probably been taxis a long time ago. But this one's got 94,000. This car was new to a sanitation company called Diversi. If you've seen in like office toilets or hotel toilets where you get your hand towels or your dryers or your hand soap, some of the time it says Diversi on it, so that's what they supply. This car was new to them. It was sold by Jessop's in Essex, but for some reason it was registered in Northampton, which is where the company was based. So I don't quite know how it wasn't registered in the garage it was sold, but there we go. Tricky clutch pedal. Good thing is you don't have to really worry about it because it's a cable clutch. It's not going to be like failing hydraulics or anything like that. It's a cable clutch, no slave cylinder or anything like that to worry about. Rusty hydraulic clutch pipes or anything. Simple as they come. The 1.7 is also an old-fashioned setup. It's got three drive belts. It's got the timing belt. So the timing belt drives, obviously it's driven by the crankshaft, it drives the camshaft obviously, and it drives the injection pump. The water pump, which I think is a good idea, is driven by an aux belt, and the alternator and power steering pump are driven by a second aux belt, and they're toothed. auxiliary belts, they're not V belts. So yeah, my overall impression of this purchase is I bought it on mechanical condition and like chassis condition rather than cosmetics. I'm having to sort of question. I would point out that the green one was also perfectly fine in terms of chassis condition, but the chassis wasn't in as good condition as this one, and the engine obviously had 206,000 miles, whereas this one was 94. So I went with that. Plus, it's a turbo diesel, indirect injection. I've never owned an engine like that before, so and it's a lovely car to drive. So I think it's probably not as pretty to look at on the driveway, which is something I do like, because working from home I like to stretch my legs and have a look out the window and look at my cars in the driveway. So that's the only thing. It's got its good side when it's parked on the drive, but the other side is not very good. I also welded the sill in the back. That was the only bit of rust on it that was left, was a little hole, 2 little holes in the sill. They did get a bit bigger when I started grinding at them, but I welded that up. And it's also had the arch bottoms welded as well at the front, they all go there. But the places that Cavaliers also go above the rear spring seats on the chassis rails, no rust at all there with this. The rest of the sills are fine. The bulkhead just down there where the chassis rail meets it behind the pedals, no rust there. Subframe, cross member, windscreen surround, no evidence of any rust there at all. Floor bungs, no evidence of water ingress from a rotten bulkhead, which Cavaliers like to do. All nice and dry, no smells. So you don't have to worry about it, just jump in and drive. So yeah, here we are.